Welcome to Try This at Home. I'm Cliff Bumgardner.
And I'm Harrison Stewart.
And this week we are talking about Mythbusters Season 1, Episode 4. Our myths are Ice Bullet, Exploding Toilet, and Who Gets Wetter. This episode first aired September 23rd, 2003, which is a big jump from last episode. We were in March of 2003.
Quite a few months.
Because this is our first non-pilot episode. We have been dealing with the early, as we were calling it, pilot season episodes of Mythbusters, and this is the first real, I would say, fully funded Season 1 episode of Mythbusters.
Here we are.
It is directed again by Peter Reese, and it features a very important first appearance
Indeed.
of a true Mythbusters legend, Buster.
We get an origin story for Buster.
We get Buster in this episode. I'm going to hop right into overall thoughts with that because not just Buster, but Buster's a huge part of it. Mm-hmm. Every part of this episode, I was like, we're home.
Yeah.
Holy crap. This is the show. This is what we've been waiting for 3 episods so far.
Yes.
Episode 4, we're now watching Mythbusters.
That's right. It's like getting to Skyfall.
Yeah.
in the Craig movies where you're like, fine. And then, Skyfall, no. Skyfall doesn't.
You want to take that back?
Well, no. The analogy still works, but I don't think they ever move the gun barrel sequence back to the beginning of the movie. I think it stays at the end for all of the Craig movies. But that's the first time that, we've gotten all the buildup out of the way. Like, he is Agent 007, codenamed James Bond. He's a cold, broken man that will sleep with anything that moves. Like, he's
and
here.
That is a lot like Adam and Jamie.
Yeah. And Buster. Come on.
I gotta say,
Buster's promiscuous. You can tell.
I gotta say, as a whole, I thought this show was awesome. I thought it was super effective. I thought each myth was tight.
Yeah.
There was not a lot of fat on the bone anywhere. It was just like, here's the information that you need. We still had it was interesting to see a lot of the elements that we've come to expect, like the montages and things like that, but like souped up.
Yeah.
Like they just work better now. Even the interviews, which we'll get into, work so much better in this episode. I thought as a whole, it felt like they had a much better idea of what they were trying to accomplish, and they nailed it.
Every single thing that I thought worked really well in the pilots was turned up.
Yep.
Everything that I thought, that's a bit of a weird choice, was turned down.
Yep.
I mean, like, I don't know if they were working with like audience groups or what happened, or just getting to show some episodes and have the audience react. But someone was taking exquisite notes.
Yeah.
Because the product that we get now it's the show. It is the Mythbusters I've always remembered. And we're not even out of the first season.
I really think that they were just having the same reaction that we've had. I think as they were making the episodes, they were just like, okay, that works, that doesn't. If we get to do this again, we're going to do it this way. We're going to do it that way.
Yep.
They were taking notes. And when they actually got the green light and got to make the show, my guess is they just said, all right, here we go. Let's start our stuff now. We figured it out. We know what the show's going to be. And they did it. I mean, it's crazy the difference between those first 3 episodes and this one. I think if those first 3 episodes didn't have such iconic myths in them, I would even say this just should have been the first episode of season 1.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have Rocket Car, you have so many of these things that are, if you've got that on camera, you're going to show it. Yeah. So I understand why they aired those original pilots, but man, yeah, it's so good to be home.
It is. And it's really nice that I think the only 2 things that are now missing is we're still doing every myth in order and in its entirety to its conclusion, right? So myth 1, done. Myth 2, done. It's still not intercut.
It's totally linear at this point.
Totally linear still. But and also the sidekicks aren't quite there yet.
And I think those 2 are related. I think until you have the other Mythbusters crew that would become known as the M7 crew, it's hard to intercut the myths because you've got the same 2 people.
True.
Right? Now I think they do that with Adam and Jamie later on, but it's still a little bit challenging to cut from Adam and Jamie to Adam and Jamie and feel like and understand visually we're in a different place, right? So true. I think those 2, that's a good observation that I think they're actually that you mentioned there, but I think they're actually related.
That's fair. That's perfectly fair. And I mean, now we do get another first appearance.
We do
on this episode, not of a person, but of a thing.
I'm so excited about that. I can't wait to talk about that.
Proceed.
So myth 1, the exploding toilet. So the idea of this myth is that it is framed as a husband and wife, and I think that is kind of a pointlessly gendered way of going about this myth.
Yeah.
So I'll frame it as someone put combustibles down a toilet, and then a guy came in, sat down, lit a cigarette and threw it between his legs into the toilet, and it exploded, throwing him off of the toilet. So that is the question. Can that happen?
Already. Like that's a bit of a problem with this one already. I have so many questions.
Yes.
I have so many. Excuse me, point of order.
Yes. Why were you putting combustibles down a toilet?
Did you not flush?
Yeah. Was there no flushing involved?
Were you just smoking in the bathroom, or did you do the business and then smoke? Were you doing them at the same time? Like I have so many questions.
But I will say immediately what I love about this that's different from the pilots is it's a more binary question. It's not an open-ended, this real story that we're going to go back and show. They get into that a little bit of like trying to investigate, has this ever happened? Yeah. But it's more of is it possible? It's more of a science question. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to have enough, combustible materials in a toilet that when they're lit, it will actually throw you off of a toilet? Like there is a real, they made it into a testable question, and they actually removed some of those, to your point, some of the more like human elements from it, which I think is smart. I actually think that it makes even just writing down what this myth was about was easier than almost anything in the first 3 episodes. True. And I think that says a lot.
True. And like, they're not questioning, do we have somebody that's stupid enough to put these items in and they're also generally trying to stick with stuff that people have relatively easy access to.
Yeah.
But then when that just clears, no problem, I love that they just switch to the gears and they're like, what's the lowest threshold for blowing this sucker up?
How can we blow up a toilet?
It's great.
So my first note as they jumped into this myth was immediately this feels like a whole new show. Production, sound, editing, structure, every bit of it's better. Yes. Like they clearly got money to make the show, and every part of it just feels like it sings. It's just a better television show, Mythbusters or not. Like it immediately kind of reinforced what I felt like we were missing in the first 2 episodes or first 3 episodes. And I went, oh, we weren't wrong. Okay, good. Okay. This actually is like, there was a big difference between these episodes. Yeah. But one thing that is still around are our shopping montages. Got to have the shopping montages. So we start out with Adam and Jamie going to a junkyard to look for a toilet.
Naturally.
Wonderful little back and forth of them arguing over toilets in a junkyard. Of course, it's our boys.
No, yeah. What else would they be up to?
And we get our first real introduction for our folklorist, who is back. It's a new interview. You can tell that this was a new shoot that they did, and they shot a lot more with her, and they actually say her name. So I now know how to pronounce it. Dr. Heather Joseph Witham is how they say her name. And she's a much bigger part of the show already. Even in this episode, she feels like the kind of unofficial third Mythbuster, because she's not there in the room with them, but she is really giving even more context, and they've put a lot more into what she's saying in this episode. And I thought it really worked.
I did too, because it makes her feel like, almost like a governing authority.
Yes.
It kind of like it feels like the person who gives Mr. Phelps the mission in Mission Impossible.
Yes.
Like it kind of, that's the person not in charge, but that's the home office.
And she gives I think the right amount in this episode of not just the folklore, but the potential real story aspects without it being too much or being completely distracting. I love she actually takes this myth all the way back to exploding outhouses and has a line about some old codger getting blown out of the outhouse and then saying, must have been something I ate.
Fantastic.
And my note was just, I know people like this. I'm from the South. That is entirely believable to me.
That's an entire demographic. That's a voting block. The type of people that would make that joke have political power. It's a sizable chunk.
I feel like there were probably people watching the show going like, that's unrealistic. And I was going, no, I know people that is absolutely true.
That has happened, surely.
No doubt. So their first kind of part of the experiment is they decide to armor up Jamie, and they're going on this idea that Jamie is actually going to sit on the toilet when it explodes.
Right.
Which I didn't buy for a second that they were really going to do that, because I think that's insane, but I love the buildup.
I do too. The best part about that is that they go ahead and armor him. Like they build this like Fallout-esque, football armor, basically. Get him to don it and
light some of it on fire.
Yes. Figure out that it's actually quite flammable, the whole thing.
Yeah, a rubber suit. Go figure.
Oh, who knew?
What this leads to is, hey, Jamie's got second thoughts. Who's gonna do it? And I knew
gonna step up.
I knew what it was gonna be, but it didn't take any of the joy away. I could not wait to see it, and we saw him. Our boy Buster makes his Mythbusters debut, unloaded, assembled, and a fully fledged Mythbuster with the name all at the same time. It was awesome,
fresh out of the box.
I can't imagine that we have to explain this, but for anyone listening who maybe isn't up to this part of the show or hasn't ever seen the show, Buster is they seem to say used crash test dummy.
Yes, they did.
A retired crash test dummy, which there's some, I don't know about you. I feel like, did you ever have the crash test dummy toys when you were a kid?
No.
There was a line of toys in the 90s that were these crash test dummy toys that I had that sadly later got thrown away, and I'm still sad about that. But
they were tested for it. They were ready.
I really feel like crash test dummies were like a thing for 90s kids.
Culturally?
Yeah, I don't know why. I know they were for me. I don't know if anybody else shares that. But so there's still a part of me that when I see Buster harkens back to that. And I remember as a kid thinking Buster was the coolest thing in the world. And I still feel that now in my 30s.
That's fascinating. I could not have a more opposite, gut, visceral reaction against. And I think the reason why is that the context under which I can recall, obviously it's Buster. It's good to see him. I know he's fine. But seeing crash test dummies and what I think of are like the horrible PSAs where they're like, your head's going to be rolling down the sidewalk. That's not even a bit. That's a real, when I took
Blood
driver's
on the Asphalt. It's a classic series. That's literally that's a thing.
I forgot that that's what it's called though. That is hard as hell. Yeah, that's the one where also they show like an example of
great punk album though.
Like true. That's the one where they show an example of like one guy who like honks at another. He's like, hey man, can you not? And then the other like gets a shotgun out and just shotguns his face. There were so many test dummies in those videos though, like when they were showing what happens to a car. So specifically, I always think about test dummies within the realm of like something horrible is going to happen.
Yeah. So we have started recently to mention on this show that you and I may have our own Adam and Jamie dynamic. And I don't even know who is who, but just it's our own
right.
Like Cliff and Harrison thing. And now we're learning that when I see a crash test dummy, I think of childhood toys and days around the television set, watching my favorite TV show, Mythbusters. You think of somebody taking a shotgun out on the highway.
Yes. Yeah. It was a great video that they showed us. And it's a good and responsible thing to put a human adult in front of children and tell them that their head will be rolling down the sidewalk.
And 25 some odd years later, you're totally over it. I can tell.
Yeah, I love driving.
Had no lasting effect.
No, definitely not. Definitely. What's up with all these kids with anxiety? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, how did that happen?
I don't know.
I did love that as soon as they assemble Buster for the first time, the first thing Adam does is kick him in the head and then reach down and try to wipe the mark away, which is the most like red flag, man. Doing it and then apologizing.
Yeah,
like, what the hell was that?
Yeah. In the same measure.
It's so strange. So they start to actually kind of build the mechanisms that they need for this myth. And in addition to Buster, we get our first blast chamber.
Yeah.
That's another thing that becomes a huge part of the show, the bulletproof Lexan and all this kind of stuff. That's a major, like, just visual component of Mythbusters. And we get the first one here. And we get Jamie building a hand that is robotic and can drop the cigarette.
That was very impressive.
And I don't know about you, I had a weird, like, not a major thing, but I just had a weird thing of, like, there's a clip of Adam, like, smoking a cigarette beforehand and, like, seeing people smoke on TV. Felt a little weird. We don't see that in this kind of programming anymore.
See, I also made a note about that moment, but for totally different reasons. I just wrote, Adam does weeds. Just like the way that he's holding it. Like, it's such a specific, like, between like finger and middle, like thumb and middle finger, you know, like the way that he like sucks it in, holds it in, is just like, that's not how you smoke a cigarette, my man.
But I think what you were alluding to a minute ago is we also get our very first high-speed camera.
That's it. That's the high-speed camera is a character, man.
This was so cool to see. And it also, I've said in the past that I had a thought that in my memory, Mythbusters was kind of like a visual history of the high-speed camera, of like how far that they've come. And this sort of reinforced that because they talk about this is 1,000 frame per second high-speed camera. Ooh, like now that's nothing. I mean, over the course of the show, I think they're going to get up into the hundreds of thousands of frames a second, if I remember, for some of the explosions and the gunshots and stuff that they would get to. So this one looked so janky when they showed the very first shot. And it's worth noting that the very first true high-speed shot in Mythbusters history is a cigarette bouncing off of a toilet seat.
So good.
Which is fitting.
Just so good.
But it was awesome. Again, it's another one of those elements of like, man, we're home.
Yeah. And to the point that actually the thing that shocked me the most about the pilots is that if you would ask me how was Mythbusters constructed, like what was its genesis? Some dudes found a high-speed camera. Like that's the moment that like everything. So to see it,
that's
like,
the discovery of fire in the history of Mythbusters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is truly like the moment of where the light turns on. But so it was interesting to see them operate for 3 episodes without. Yeah. And then it's like, I wonder how long it's going. Oh no, there it is. Okay.
We're
back.
I imagine that's also partly a budget thing. Is when they said, "Oh, we're doing the show for real. We can get some money. We can actually do," because obviously high speed camera technology was fairly new at this point, and so it was like, "Oh, we can actually get in on that and use that on the show." And I remember that being one of the things that people actually talked about with Mythbusters was, you got to watch the show. They do this high speed video, which we hadn't really seen. I mean, this is still pretty new into the digital video thing, and so film you could only crank so fast. So this is all like, now it feels dated, but this was a big deal at the time. So it's like it's amazing to see it here. After this, we actually get our first test. They go right to the actual myth of filling the toilet with Mythbusters branded hairspray, which means they've learned.
Indeed. I noted that.
They no longer have to blur all of the objects because they learned to just change the logo.
It's no longer potentially a Pepsi Cola.
Exactly.
In that can. That could be anything.
That mysteriously changes to Coke and back and forth from scene to scene.
It could be CoverGirl. It could be Tresemme. It could be Aussie. I think I've exhausted all. And one of those may not have even been a hairspray.
I'm amazed you got 3. I don't think I could have done that.
Thank you.
That's impressive. But in this very first test, it's pretty straightforward. They don't even have Buster on the toilet yet. They just fill the bowl with the hairspray, drop the cigarette in, and unsurprisingly, nothing happens.
Does Buster even get used?
At the very end. They save him for the very end, which I think was smart. But very first test, nothing happens. Test 2, they use more spray. Still nothing happens. Oh, sorry, they use bug spray actually in the second test. Still nothing happens. And I noted here that in one of the shots, Adam's t-shirt says stunt butt.
My God.
His shirt just says stunt butt.
We've got you.
It's never commented on.
Red-handed.
I kind of want one.
Ooh. Can we make stunt butt merch? Can we have the rights to that?
We've made it 4 episodes without talking about merch on a podcast. That's a record.
Damn. And then I ruined it.
No, I think it's impressive. It's
It's
going to happen sooner or later.
True. I would love to meet who owns the copyright to Stunt Butt.
It's got to be Adam, right? I mean, who else would own that?
Yes. And then we have to like track him down John Wick 3 style in order like he's out in the desert somewhere.
Then they go through a handful of tests, all of which don't work. I'll briefly kind of recap them. Test 3 is even more bug spray and a lit match instead of a cigarette. And for anyone who is wondering, in the South, it is not uncommon. I don't know about other places in the world to have matches kept in a bathroom to light to alleviate smell, to use as an air freshener. I have had people, even down here, say that sounds insane and have never seen that before. So if anyone was looking at this and going, why would you drop a lit match into a toilet? No, that is a thing I've done in my life. Like
Same.
That is absolutely a thing that happens in some places. But I've heard people say, oh, that's ridiculous. I've never heard of that before. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. But they get a small poof from the lit match. Obviously, the open flame seems a lot more effective than just like the burning ember.
Yep.
But not enough to really do anything. Test 4, they use butane, which this is where I really started to wonder, why the hell is butane getting put in the toilet?
Yeah.
A butane in a cigarette, nothing. Test 5, butane in a lit match. They finally get flames.
Finally get a poof.
You finally see it, a nice shot, high-speed shot, flame shooting up out of the toilet. Pretty cool stuff.
Yep.
But not enough to blast somebody off a toilet.
Not off the toilet.
No. And this is also where I noted, like, this is basically the inverse of the airplane toilet myth.
Mm-hmm.
That myth is all about keeping you stuck to a toilet. Now they're trying to blast you off a toilet. I don't know that means anything, but the creative writing kid in me had to point that out.
Okay. Noted.
They go to a break, and when we come back, we actually see Adam and Jamie board a plane to travel to go meet up with a doctor for the interview section of the show. They got some budget.
That's right.
That is such a huge difference to actually see Adam and Jamie traveling to go talk to these people. It contextualizes the interviews so much better than what we saw in the pilots. I think.
Well, and also because I don't think in the pilots that it was even Adam or Jamie that was talking to the people.
You never see him. It could have been anybody. You feel like it was a producer probably. Yeah.
That now this man.
Oh, I want to spend some time on this man.
Let's spend a little bit of time on this man.
I'm gonna leave it to you to say his name because I know you're so excited about this.
Thank you. I am. This is Dr. Robert Slay.
Amazing.
No notes. I have nothing to add to that. I have like even the pairing of the banal Robert with the last name Slay. Robert Slay, MD. I just love the dissonance of my name is Slay. But I will not be this thing. I will not.
I will put people back together.
I will not become what I was meant to be.
And that this guy has tested this before, which made me wonder, how did they find this guy?
That does seem oddly specific. Like,
yes.
You're the other guy that's tried to blast yourself off of a toilet?
I don't think Google was that good in 2003.
Couldn't have been.
You could find the one other guy.
There's no way. Now, Jeeves would have gotten you there.
Oh, Jeeves got him there.
But, yeah.
They asked Jeeves and it really worked out.
Certainly not Google.
My favorite thing about Dr. Slay is, for some reason, they clearly go to him to talk about the science of this, right? And the potential effects if this were to happen. But he starts going on about like the social aspect of why a story like this is useful.
Yeah.
And this man proceeds to describe the importance of fun and humor in the least fun or humorous way imaginable.
As you may well know, there are studies that show that people are more creative. They think of better solutions when they're working in what they call a fun environment or a place where there can be humor.
In what they call
in a fun environment, much like the one that you have facilitated here.
It's like he's describing something out of a textbook. Well, this is what they call an atom. No, in what they call a fun environment. You could feel the air quotes around it.
Yeah.
Fun environment.
Yeah, like the alien style, like,
yes.
So this is what they call a fun environment. Fascinating.
Truly fun has never been so boring.
I can't name Doesn't come to mind. And that's incredible that you can have a man who is named Slay, who fixes people. No fun.
A man named Slay who has tested whether or not it is possible to blow somebody off of a toilet with with an explosion.
Yes.
And yet he's still that dull.
Boring.
How?
I don't know.
It's an accomplishment when you think about it.
You would think that someone would rise to the occasion of this name, of this happening, but
he's my favorite. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's my favorite interview we've had yet on the show. The combination of the name and that clip, I think he's my favorite interview thus far.
I think it's definitely a tight race. I'm still going to give it to Mr. Barry just because it's incredibly strange to me to be so obsessed with one story that you know the outcome to. Like, this isn't like being obsessed with the Zodiac, you know, like, you know what happened. It's well documented. Why? There's no reason to fall into an obsession over this. But
so
I love you, Mr. Barry. We would love to talk with you.
So Adam and Jamie back at M5, they do a few more tests. The next test is gasoline with a cigarette, straight gasoline in a toilet, by the way. Why? But they do it, straight gasoline in a cigarette, nothing. The gas just puts the cigarette out. And this is one of those things that I feel like I learned through Mythbusters is it can actually be very hard to light flammable things on fire.
Yes.
Which is weird, but it's true. Different oxygen, solutions and different, all these different factors really play a role. You would think you drop something hot with a vat of gasoline, it goes off. Not actually the case. So then they go from just gasoline and a cigarette to gasoline and a lit match. They get flames, which makes sense, but very little force is not going to blow you off the toilet.
Yeah.
So finally, this is what you're referencing earlier. They go to what they call Solution X.
Yes.
And this is one of those great Mythbusters moments that we haven't seen very much of on the show so far of, okay, we've tested this within reason and we haven't gotten what we want. Now we're going to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so it's just straight gunpowder.
That's like all of this episode, though.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Certainly in the last one as well. They're just like, we're testing for what we want to now,
and we're going to make it really fun,
and we're going to make it just the best thing to watch.
And you see when they light the gunpowder just like on the lid of a trash can, like gunpowder is terrifying.
It's so scary.
Like, obviously this show where it would go with C4 and all these crazy explosives and ANFO and all this kind of stuff. Like, this is nothing compared to where it would be. But even this little bit of gunpowder is really scary, and they have to get permission from the fire marshal just to do it.
And the fire marshal is another one of my favorite characters.
He's fantastic.
So imagine, listener, since you can't see him, paint an image. Imagine if Paul Blart was Mormon. And you've got it. You've got him in your head. Like that is what he looks like.
Paul Blart, Mormon cop.
That's right. Mormon cop. Here to make sure that we don't have too much fire. A little fire is fine, but which is also really funny because I wouldn't expect a fire marshal to have what I would describe as low-key arsonist vibes. Like, I mean, he's all about it.
Isn't that the thing? Like, isn't like the reason people get into that work is they love this stuff? I'm not accusing this man of being a firebug. I'm just saying, like, you become a fire marshal because it's cool to blow stuff up, right? Like, I mean, that's why I would do it.
Maybe. I don't know. Every fire marshal I've ever dealt with was just like the same 70-year-old mustachioed man.
He did actually have to, though, to his credit, he did walk them back.
Exactly once.
And I loved this moment so much where they are asking him, Jamie is asking him, all right, how much gunpowder are we allowed to put in? And I pulled the clip. His reaction's fantastic.
How much? I put it all in there.
That's too much.
Half of it?
That's a hell of a lot.
What I love is he tries to laugh off the first one with just, haha, that's too much. And then Jamie goes, half of it? And you see his face change and he's like, that's a hell of a lot. Like, you see the moment dawn on him of, oh God, but I just told them no on full, so I have to go for this.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh no, what have I done?
I would like to submit this as one of the clips that we keep like on file.
Yes.
For like any time in the show when just like a joke goes a little too far, like just the awkward, too much. Like,
You're talking about James Bond again? Too much.
I've been trying to grasp the same thought unsuccessfully for 3 minutes. Too much.
We're going to see if that joke makes the edit, how much of what made the edit before will determine whether that makes any sense to the listener.
That's fair. That's perfectly fair. I'm also going to bite myself in the butt with this one because like I'm the one that's going to be used against. It's not the other way around. Clearly.
I don't know, man. It's early. We'll see.
We'll see.
I did make a note because this is where Buster makes his official debut in a test. They put him on the toilet. And I just noted it. What is it with debuts and butts on this show? The first time we meet Carrie Byron properly, they are scanning her butt for the airplane toilet myth.
Yes.
And now Buster's first myth, they're gonna light his butt on fire.
Light that ass on fire.
And what's great, I mean, we finally get the explosion. This is that moment that you've been waiting for, that you want. It's Mythbusters. You want to see it blow up. I did love. They mentioned this earlier, and we didn't really talk about it, but it was really cool how they built the blast cage the blast shield in two halves. So if there was pressure, it would just move instead of blowing up.
Yeah.
That was really smart. Like that was a thing that I don't remember that I remember the blast shields from the show.
Yep.
But I don't remember that. That was a very smart thing that they did. That you see it here. You see it separate which adds more action to that high speed shot of it all blowing up, and you get that great. It's fantastic. This is maybe the first like full, like the orchestra has come together to make Mythbusters in this moment. It might be the first like real crescendo of a true Mythbusters moment, and it's awesome.
I agree. Because for a moment there, I was worried that it wasn't going to blow up entirely. You know? And I was like, oh, is the goal just to like get some fire out of the? Nope, there it goes.
Woo! But it still doesn't blow him off the toilet. It
doesn't
like
blow
lights
him
his pants on
off.
fire, blows his pants off, but it doesn't take him off the toilet.
Which is such a fun, because now take it back to the original story. You go into the bathroom for a smoke, something blows up, and then you're just standing there pantsless with a lit cigarette. Like,
it's a real
honey.
Wile E. Coyote kind of moment, you know?
I think I made a boo-boo.
Did you put all the gasoline in the toilet again?
Oh, whoops. We've talked about this, sweetheart. You can't put powder in the toilet. It simply can't be done.
I did think, because I was trying to...
Not that kind of powder room. Okay, now play the clip.
No, you redeemed yourself with that one. That one is definitely staying in. That was too good.
Yeah.
I did try to think a little bit, we talk a lot about like the human aspect of this. Like, is there a way for this to make any sense? The only I could think of is like, maybe if you're cleaning up an empty house and people are just trying to get rid of stuff, but why would you put an aerosol in a toilet? The gasoline almost makes more sense to me of like, I can flush this, it's a liquid, even though that's incredibly stupid, and please don't do that.
Right.
But an aerosol, when they started with that, I was like, I just don't see how this, even on that foundation, this myth makes any sense. It's cool. I love it. But it didn't make much sense from that perspective either.
No, I agree. And also, like, I was ripping on the smoking thing earlier. That makes sense. They said that this is in like the 40s or 50s. Like, you know, there's a window in the bathroom. You go smoke in the bathroom so the whole house doesn't smell, whatever. That plausible. It's mainly that this requires you to not only dump the liquids, but to just not flush for no good reason.
Right.
That's another thing that I'm just like, and then you left them there?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. This is
and also, if you left them there, that guy's going to see it.
It's even hard on this one for me. We've talked about like with Biscuit Bazooka, we talked about a few episodes ago how like this may be ridiculous, but I can sort of see how the story would come about. This one, it's very even hard to see that. Like I think this just totally feels like somebody, thought it would be funny to make up a story like this.
It was.
To quote our friend Dr. Slay, they wanted to create what they call a fun environment.
What you would call a fun environment.
When we get to the solution on this one, I mean, I think we're on the same page as them that it's fully busted. But what we really, this is, I think, our first for real busted, because we get our first busted sign.
We do.
It's a very weird graphic,
Yeah.
very early 2000s graphic, but we get an actual busted from the narrator. Robert Lee says it, and they put it on screen, and it's like that's an actual convention of the show now. We're going to say this.
No sound effect yet.
True,
No.
like the metal, like,
That,
chung.
yeah. That's still whatever genius decided to add that in has not done so yet.
He's still holding the cigarette.
Myth number 2, they called this "Who Gets Wetter," which is weird to say. This is where we get, speaking of our Mythbusters signs, we get our first real metal Mythbusters sign at the introduction to this myth. The actual like welded Mythbuster sign they used as like a cutaway piece. We see that, which is super cool. Again, another one of those little
What
pieces.
are they doing to it in that clip?
I think it's like water has been dumped over it.
Yeah.
Or it's like emerging out of water or something like that.
Yeah. I couldn't tell if like they had frozen water onto it and then like the water was melting.
Oh, maybe that could be. Maybe it's like just melting ice.
It was some kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
That I was like, well, they still haven't quite figured that out yet. But it's closer.
It's
closer.
very early 2000s, like we've seen Terminator, that kind of like metal and blue light kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's cool. It's
Sparks.
sparks. It's very cool to see. Before we even get to the myth in this episode, though, we actually had like a jump ahead, like a jump through time.
What's this? Adam and Jamie browsing in a sex shop?
This is the moment that there was, I forget which myth it was. It was an earlier myth where they went to the monster shop. And I remember saying like, oh, I remember there being like a sex store that they go to. This is
This is the sex
This
store.
must be the myth. But yeah, weird preamble to introduce this.
Yeah,
this
yeah,
myth.
yeah, yeah.
Just like, how are we going to hook them? Sex shop.
Yeah. What kind of butt plugs are these two picking up? I don't know, dog. Why don't I just let him be?
That's too much.
There's our first use right there. Perfect timing.
It's really good when you get burned by your own joke.
Within about 15 minutes.
If that. That was a quick draw McGraw over here. I gotta be careful.
So this myth, if we could keep it together long enough. Oh man. This myth, I love this myth again because of the simplicity of it. Very, very simple. The idea, the question, do you get less wet by walking in the rain instead of running? So you would obviously think if you're outside, starts to rain, and you want to get to your car or whatever, get inside, you would run because you're out there for a shorter amount of time. You're not going to get as wet. This myth states, no, you actually get hit by more rain because you're running into it than if you're walking, even though you're in the rain longer when you're walking.
Right.
So you would actually get less wet even though you're walking. So that is a really interesting question, and also one that when it was, I have seen this episode, it's been a long time ago. This is kind of a famous myth within Mythbusters canon. But when I saw this, I had no idea. I genuinely, with this one, I was like, I cannot recall what this is, and I do not, either result would be interesting.
I think the result because I felt that it was pretty, because who's listening to this that doesn't run in the rain?
Right.
Like, I
Very
mean, it's such a
relatable.
universal thing. I having seen this episode, still ran from my car to the front door here.
Yes.
Like it's one of those things where it's just so deeply ingrained.
But it's also one of those things, and there were a few of these over the years where it's actually something from Mythbusters you can take into your daily life. Like I know there have been a few of those of Mythbusters tests and experiments that have changed things in whether it was like there's some cases it's policy, they've had effects on people's lives have been saved due to stuff that they learned from the show. This is obviously not at that level, but still this is actually something I will, now that we're talking about it, I'll remember this going forward. It's fascinating.
Exactly.
It's great.
And for the same reason that I now know not to go around dumping gunpowder into toilets.
You were the one.
For several years. They're never going to get me. But obviously you're right. Like, I mean, I'm that way with tailgating. Trucks, like I don't tailgate. There are other better reasons not to tailgate a truck, but
sure.
It's definitely one of those that I don't think that's true anymore because I have seen them disprove it.
And that's obviously not an episode we've gotten to, but that is a Mythbusters test that happens later on the show.
Yeah.
This one was what I loved, I think, the most about this myth, and they get into it straight away, is the process. The process explanation in this is so great, where they immediately sketch out, here's exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We're going to set up an indoor rain course. It's 100 feet long. We're going to wear cotton overalls, and we're going to measure them so that we know how much water they've collected during different tests.
Right.
It's what we've talked about before that we were missing in some of the early episodes, where I immediately know what's going to happen and why.
Yep.
Like, I know how the result is going to be determined, not just what, the binary question of what the result will be. And that's so good.
Yeah.
It's so much better. And this is actually kind of a complicated question when you really think about it. And they made it simple in a great way, I thought. We do get, as I wrote in my notes, shopping montage once again, but this time it may be one of the best ones so far, because this is where the guys actually go to a sex shop to get these latex suits. And the thing is, it's obviously a like, haha, wink, wink, kind of funny, we're going to put Adam and Jamie in an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
There is actually a reason for it. They want to make sure that their perspiration doesn't affect the test.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to show them going into a sex shop for that, but boy, it makes for good TV.
That's true. That's true. And
No problem with
That's why it's there. You know, they could have ordered that online.
They then go on to buy pipe to make the rain machine. And I just had a note here that I thought it was super cool, where Adam picks up a piece of pipe and he's talking about how he's seen it in movies used to make movie guns.
Yeah.
And it was such a shade of the Adam we now see on his YouTube channel, deconstructing how movie props are made and showing how, what they call kit bashing, taking existing objects and making things out of them and that kind of stuff. I don't know, just a cool little glimpse of like, oh, that's the Adam that we know all these years later. It's, it's still cool. It's really cool to see.
Yeah. He's explaining it.
Yeah, it's great. They actually get into a really good discussion here too of the terminal velocity of rain, to talk about the way, how high the rain needs to be dropped from, to ensure that they're not basically just water hosing the guys, but it's actually rain droplets that are propelling themselves through gravity the way that it really would be, not just being shot out of something. And they came to North Carolina, which is kind of interesting.
Sure did.
For folks listening, we record this show in North Carolina, to talk to two guys from the National Climatic Data Center, which I thought was pretty cool.
It's very cool. Well, it's not super. The reason that it's here is because we get a lot of hurricanes.
This is true. We almost get blasted off the face of the earth about once every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
Which fittingly, my notes, Google changed, auto-corrected it to National Climactic Data Center, which fits pretty well.
Well, that hurts.
It knows.
It's not inaccurate.
But it's a great discussion of the science behind all this and how it works. And we find out here, and I loved this, that these guys have done their own test of the same question.
Right.
But the narrator says, we won't reveal their results just yet.
Perfect.
That was a great bit of storytelling.
Yeah.
To set up that there's going to be a comparison and to make you wonder. And of course, it pays off because of what that result is. But I thought it was great. It was, again, going back to some of our complaints in earlier episodes, this was a perfect use of the expert characters and of the fact that this research has been done before and how to use it in the story. It was great.
Great. What did you think the answer was going to be to this one?
If I'd had to guess, I would have said walk. Walking would be better. Only because I know that this is a classic myth, and I feel like it's not as interesting if the result is what you expect it to be. So I'm doing a little bit of like bad test taking there.
Yeah.
But if you just presented it to me outside of the confines of a show, I'd say, oh, it's way better to run. It's way better to run because that's your natural knee jerk reaction. Within the episode, I figured it was going to be walk. Just again, it's the producer brain thing.
Right.
But yeah, that was my thinking.
That's fair. But also, I mean, you could make an argument that like they are testing this because the lie about it being better to walk is so prevalent that they want to disprove that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was a run all day, man.
They cut for the actual test. They cut to our first glimpse of the Alameda Naval Base, which becomes a home away from home for Mythbusters.
Indeed.
So much of Mythbusters happens in or around Alameda. for so much of the show. It was really cool to see its debut. It felt like I considered putting it up in the head of the show with Buster, because it feels like that much of a character on the show. It was just super cool to see it.
I do wonder if they shot the rocket car there as well.
That was in the desert, right?
Yeah, it's the same. Is Alameda not like kind of in the desert?
No, so I think the naval base is actually, I know the Alameda runway where they filmed. Which I think is adjacent, has a view of downtown San Francisco.
You're right.
So it's like right outside of town.
You're also naval. I was thinking Air Force.
Yeah, those naval bases in the desert.
Oh, you know the ones. Yeah, no. Area 51 is a naval base, my man. I don't know what you're talking about.
All those landlocked naval bases.
I know them. You know them. I don't know why we're covering this again.
We do. I did. I had to make one note that I hated to make.
Famous Nevada naval bases. Sorry, go ahead.
No, this is kind of a hard right turn, but I hated to have to make this note, but I feel like, as much as we love the show.
Oh, is it the rain dance?
When there's something that doesn't age well, we're not going to harp on it, but we have to say, so they're setting up for this. They're starting to set up the test, set up the rain machine. And as they're waiting to get it to go, by the way, the company that comes to help them is called Rain for Rent, which you only find in California. Like that is such a movie industry thing. It was cool to see, but yes, Adam does a rain dance while pretending to do some sort of native or indigenous song, and it doesn't age well, and it's not fun to see. And I have no doubt Adam would not do it now and would not think it was funny, not beating up on the guy for something he did 20 years ago, but it's worth saying, yikes, and moving on.
There it is.
But the rig works. The rain rig works. It's really cool because this is a very movie thing to do.
Yeah.
Both Adam and Jamie, I think, worked on, I know Adam did, on some of the Matrix sequels.
Is that right?
There were big rain rig sequences in those movies. I don't know if Adam worked on those, but it reminded me of this, and the Matrix filmed at Alameda. Yeah. So it was kind of an interesting couple of connections around that. But this is that kind of movie magic stuff that's just like, I feel like a little kid when I see it. I'm like, it's raining indoors, yay!
Yeah, that's a funny example because I don't recall a scene in Reloaded, but I know in Revolutions, or maybe it's just Revolution, the rain is like the most aggressive I've ever seen in my life.
Because they do all the slow-mo in the rain with the drops on the fist and all that stuff.
But even when it's not in slow-mo, it's just like you're dumping gallons of water. Like this is an unreasonable amount of water that is, well, it is the Matrix and it's glitching out.
And fun fact, you probably know this, but listeners may not if they don't know a lot about special effects. Movie rain is often dyed to make it more visible on camera.
They still do that?
Yes, they still do.
I didn't know that.
Now, back in the day, I think they used to add milk, which is a horrible idea.
I think that's true of Rashomon. Is the example that I know of.
Well, it's just like movie snow used to be deadly. It was like, it contained like arsenic. I think some of the old, I'm talking about 1930s Hollywood snow, and they had to ban it because they found
it's
out
asbestos.
Yeah, exactly. It was might have even been asbestos and not arsenic. I don't remember,
Probably
but
was.
It's out there. So that kind of stuff gets used all the time. But and they ended up adding here. They added red dye to this rain to make it more visible on the jumpsuits,
right? On
the white jumpsuits. So all of the Adam and Jamie movie special effects guru-ness definitely coming out in this myth, which was super cool too.
Something felt vaguely dark about watching red tinted water go down a drain.
Didn't it?
Yeah.
Like you could have done blue.
Yeah.
I did have that thought too of like, red. Man, they're just raining blood. Like Slayer is going to be playing in the background. Very strange.
Especially since there are several scenes where they are interviewing in front of what I have to assume is like a prop or something from one of Jamie's past movies, but it's just this mutilated man.
Yes. That's something we didn't mention is that they now have a room for the blueprint sequences.
Yes.
Which evolves, if I remember correctly, we'll have to keep an eye on this, but if I remember correctly, it evolves over the show. The blueprint room becomes a thing. But at this point, this is the first time we've actually seen it. And yes, several of the props are like horror movie corpses in the background.
Yeah.
Super awesome and weird. But there was a great moment when they were working on the rain rig and they were trying to figure out the fans. They had these, big fans, which didn't really end up becoming a major part of it, but they had to put this sequence in there of Adam and Jamie arguing in very classic Mythbusters fashion about the fans. And because we talk so much about the Adam and Jamie relationship and how key it is to the show, I had to pull this clip.
Let's set it up my way first.
Okay.
Of course I want to set it up my way first. Do you want to set it up your way first?
I don't care, actually, Adam.
Jamie got some sass.
That Adam is also just so pointed.
It's such a parental.
I don't care. Yeah.
It's a parental Adam. I don't care, actually, Adam.
And it's also a very, you're the only one that wants to have this conversation right now.
Maybe that's my version of your soundboard clip is anytime I'm going on to some pointless research that I get too deep in, it's just, I don't care, actually, Adam.
I don't care. Mark it. Oh, we're getting some good ones in this episode. We're getting some good ones.
So they get ready for the very first test. They're in their latex suits. They, as we said, dye the water red to make it more visible. And they start off by walking. The high-speed shots of the rain falling, awesome. It's so...
Great.
It's like immediately it's hard to imagine Mythbusters without the high-speed cameras because it's already such a part of the visual language of the show. It's just so good.
Yeah.
And in the very first test, Adam's coveralls far heavier after the run.
Yeah.
From their very first test, they get that result. And this is where they actually reveal what the meteorologists from the Climate Center here in North Carolina, what their results were, which was the opposite. Now, they did mention when the meteorologists were talking about it that their test was nowhere near as controlled. They waited for a rainy day and they kind of ran out and did it.
Right.
So the rain is not going to be consistent necessarily. Very hard to get any sort of control over that. So that maybe that is a factor. But I did think it was really interesting that you get two completely different results.
I did too. But I definitely, for me, it really does boil down to just the control. That you have over it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like there's no, you could have sent the people at the exact same time. Their positioning is going to make that slightly different. Like there are just too many variables.
I do wonder, and if I remember correctly, I could be completely wrong. People will tell us. I think this myth gets revisited later on, I think. But what I'm curious about is whether or not the results would be different if tested like in the real world, in a real rainstorm. If you could do that in a repeatable way, would you actually get a significant result that was different? If you just do the test once, that's not enough data to be significant. But could you actually see if it's not in an incredibly controlled environment, but you're on the street, there's water bouncing up off the street and there's cars going by and there's, all these kind of, are there other variables in the real world, which this was definitely not?
Right.
Are there other variables which may change the result? I don't know. But I did love this result. I thought it was fascinating.
I did too, and I really like how they clearly bought this high-speed camera. Right? Yeah. They're not renting it because they're now just filming everything.
Yeah, they're having fun.
Speed, which I love because I mean, again, that was new.
Yeah.
Right? Like we take it so for granted now.
Well, I mean, and that goes back to what we were saying earlier of that visual language. High speed wasn't as much a part as of the visual language of film at this point because it was only really becoming possible because you can only get to certain speeds through digital. Right. And so that had to get to that point. And again, we'll see.
Or had to be like digitally rendered like it is in the Matrix,
And and a lot of the, I would love to talk to the high-speed camera operator is credited in this episode. And I believe it's a woman. I didn't write down her name, but I did notice it. I'd love to talk to her because what I wonder is at this time, a lot of the high-speed cameras were not cinematic cameras. They were scientific cameras. Ooh. They were being used. And you notice when they show the camera, it doesn't look like a video camera or a movie camera. It's basically a box with a lens on the front.
Right.
So it looks
it's not sexy.
Yeah, it looks way more like a scientific camera, which they were, using in experiments and stuff. They were actually using for scientific testing. So I wonder if that's what this was at this stage. Later, I know that Mythbusters was one of the early adopters of what's called the Phantom, which is the incredibly fast, like the slow-mo guys have like they have a YouTube channel because they bought a Phantom. Like that's where that comes from. But Mythbusters was one of the first on that. So I'd love to talk to her and find out more about this. Maybe we can do that down the road.
And everything.
And
looks cooler in slow motion.
Absolutely. But this one is busted. The guys actually say it. So we get not only the graphic and we get it as a part of the episode, but the guys are saying it in the blueprint room now. We're home.
Busted.
So good.
I held that B for too long.
Yeah, I saw. I was trying to wind down because I could see you were holding something in. The results say it's better to walk than run. They got more than twice the rain per foot by running rather than walking.
That's the part that shocked me.
The amount.
I thought it would be comparable. Yeah. But it was like, and moving twice the speed, you acquire twice the water. I was like, that's some weird math. Yeah. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. It is shocking how extreme the difference really is.
Yes.
This one's busted. Fact is that it's better to walk than to run in the rain.
Myth number 3, ice bullet. So they call this the ice bullet. It is really the myth of the magic bullet. Can you make a bullet out of ice or, as it turns out, other substances that melts or disappears after hitting its target, leaving no trace behind?
Before we continue, I do want to ask, does this conform to your understanding of magic bullet theories? Like when you hear, me neither.
Yep.
Typically
I bumped on that too.
I have in almost every, I'm not claiming to be like, I'm not super well read on the JFK assassination theories,
Which becomes a much bigger part of this than I expected, by the way.
Me too.
Yeah.
And in fact, at first they don't even say which president. So I was like, they're just going to skip over it. And then it comes up later.
And then CG assassination footage.
It was so funny. I want to play a PS1 version, a PS2 version.
It looked like
of that footage.
It looked like Shoot the President on N64.
It looks like Hagrid, PS1 Hagrid.
It was so weird.
It was very strange.
But sorry, I interrupted you. Continue.
No, just most of the time when I've heard magic bullet, it is not because the casing was lost or
the bullet
disappeared or whatever. It was because the bullet moved from its trajectory, from where it would have had to have been shot if it was shot from the location that the authorities said Oswald was.
It did something that physics would dictate are impossible.
Exactly.
That's why it's a magic bullet.
That is exact. And in fact, the reason why I feel pretty good in saying that's the case is I want to say that the hearing that was held, the congressional hearing that was held, where the term magic bullet was coined.
The Warren Commission. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm fairly certain that it is because of the direction of the bullet, not because it wasn't there.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe that's the case as well. Yeah, that was a little bit, it was weird to me. I thought of this, and I remember this myth because it's really cool and it like stands out in my memory just because of what it is.
Yeah.
I remembered this as being like from a movie. Like there being a movie where an assassin used an ice bullet and that's where this was pulled from. I did not remember it having any connection to the Kennedy assassination or, like you said, the magic bullet, which this wasn't that. It wasn't about a bullet disappearing. Yeah.
It was a magic bullet. But when you say the magic bullet.
And this is where I had my first thought that I wrote a bunch of notes and I don't really have an overall takeaway with this. It's just something I wanted to throw up and see where it gets us. In my memory, guns become a really big part of Mythbusters. And obviously, particularly in recent years, that has become a more difficult topic and something that gets brought up a lot of what is the impact of the way that we talk about guns, the way that guns are part of culture, the way that they're reflected on television. I was a 12-year-old kid watching this show where they talk about guns all the time. And there were a lot of other people in our generation who did. What was that? And the memory that I've always had, I've thought about numerous times because, as I said, Mythbusters is my favorite show and it was my favorite show growing up. I've thought about that of like, what role did Mythbusters play or not in that? I think it's worth considering. And I've always thought that the thing that made Mythbusters different is that they talked about guns as machines. They talked about guns as physics objects, less than as weapons. And I saw that here. Now, it gets a little bit weird as they go on, because as you were saying, they talk about the Kennedy assassination, and we literally see like a CGI, scope over the president's head at one point, which is a little bit, thankfully it is PS1 graphics, or that might be a little bit intense, but as it is, it's not. But in general, I thought they had a very interesting discussion of guns in this episode, a very interesting discussion of how guns work. And they presented it as a machine.
Yeah.
Not as isn't it cool that you can shoot things?
Yes.
It was more about, here's how this thing works, and how I've heard it said before that, guns are like the real version of a magic wand, because you can exert physics at range onto something else, right? And that's very much how they present it, as this is a very strange and powerful tool that we have, and it is interesting and valuable to analyze how that works, and they do that a lot over the show. And I thought that this really set that up, and for the most part, I never felt like they were being salacious, or what's the word I'm looking for? I didn't feel like gun porn, maybe is the best way to put it. I felt like they actually struck a really good balance on this show, and the way of discussing guns, and even they're shooting a dummy. Some of the shots were, pretty gruesome when you actually think about it.
Yeah.
But I felt like they made it valuable in that discussion, in a way that a lesser show maybe wouldn't have, or that lesser, producers or creative minds maybe not. So I don't know.
True.
Like I said, I don't really have like a line to draw under that. It's something I want to watch as the show goes on, but it's what this made me think about.
Yes. And I do agree. It is, I can see an argument made that, they are specifically talking about a tool of assassination here.
Yeah.
So like there is violence against humans implicit in this thing.
For sure.
But once, I like how it adapts. Mm-hmm. I like how this particular instance moves, because once it becomes clear that they probably can't do it the way that they had initially said, they basically just go off and have fun.
Yeah.
And actually drop the gun altogether and start making like ridiculous Bond inventions.
Exactly.
Me and James Bond, what is that? Gotta cut that out. Batman has gadgets.
But you're right. It is interesting that on a show that is inherently talking about a tool of assassination, that I had that reaction.
Yeah.
And I think that just goes to, like you said, they pivot, and there's something to the fact that it's taken to such an extreme that it's sort of, I don't know. I never felt like, ugh.
Yeah.
I don't really want to see that, or I wouldn't want a kid to see this. I actually felt like, because they took it to the extreme, because of the ways that they pivoted, and just their discussion of safety and their discussion of pure mechanics of the machine of a gun.
Yes.
And how they were going to work around that bolstered it for me a lot.
Without, and I think this was incredibly intentional, without showing you the methodology.
Yeah.
Because you can't say that this becomes an anarchist cookbook situation, because they didn't show us how to build an umbrella gun. They said that they could, and then they did off screen.
Yeah.
So like
they showed more of them struggling to build an umbrella gun than anything.
True. Definitely true.
Yeah.
And I also think that they did a great job. There were a few times where the person that they were talking to, so this is inherently problematic.
Yes.
Talking to anybody who gets into the weeds of the JFK assassination, apart from the simple, like, oh, well, it was the CIA. Come on now. Like, that's the one that's like, yeah. There's something to that. There's actual like evidence. Anything outside of that, it's such a seminal historical moment that it attracts
tinfoil hats.
Biggest tinfoil hat, like Napoleon-sized tinfoil hats.
Yeah.
It you have to be careful with it.
Yeah.
it's kind of like 9/11 trutherism, where like this is a lightning rod for a particular type of person. And I thought that they did a good job in selecting a person that had studied it in an academic setting, and B, kind of cutting him off when he went into what like he thought happened. They're like, no, thank you. You've said what you need to say. We're not getting into the whole like. We're not getting into why. We're not getting into. We're interested in the physics of the thing. That's about it.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's really interesting territory for the show, and I'm certainly not going to say that they handled everything perfectly, but I thought overall I was impressed and surprised with what they did.
Same.
So getting back into the actual episode, though, this is where we get our introduction of ballistics gel, which is another staple of the show, something that would come back throughout the show a lot over the years to make human analogs for all kinds of tests. One of the things about ballistics gel that I think later on the show, I think they go into after years of using it a lot, it's actually really hard to make, and it has to be, I mean, obviously you have to make a ton of it, and it's not easy to make. It's not easy to deal with. But one of the things is it has to be chilled, and they need a giant fridge to chill the ballistics gel overnight. And so where do you go but the local deli?
See, and that, like, they do present it that way. They're like, where could we possibly? I was like, is it a morgue? Is the answer a morgue? A morgue? Perhaps a morgue? A deli, of course. I didn't have deli on my card. Yeah, no, that was not.
Did you notice they didn't comment on this when they are rolling this ballistics gel torso through the deli?
Yeah, is it the fact that there's two inmates in there?
Did you notice the two guys in yellow and orange like convict jumpsuits?
Yeah, I did. I sure did.
What the hell's going on?
I don't know, man. I don't know. Like I saw it. I was like, well, that's nice. They're where are we?
What is going on?
We're in a local deli. Is the deli inside of a prison? Has everybody in this neighborhood deli decided that orange is kind of the new black, actually?
And somehow it meant that Adam and Jamie and the ballistics gel dummy, not the weirdest thing in this deli.
Not even kind of.
Not even possible?
Kind of. Especially like because they just like they don't explain like this is Adam's friend who they're just this is a local deli. And also, those two just got away.
The deli guy did have a really good joke where he's like, you guys want to buy some lunch? We got Jell-O on sale. Good joke.
Classic deli guy
jokes. Good deli guy joke.
You can always depend on the deli guy for a joke like that.
From there, we got a little bit more process as Jamie built a mold to make ice bullets, which is a really cool. It's one of those, it kind of harkens back to the biscuit, what they call the biscuit bandolier in that earlier episode, where it's always cool to see the weird things these guys have to build. And this is where we got kind of what I was referencing earlier, one of the first real graphics packages about how bullets and guns work and really explaining it. And they throw up something here that I ended up having to come back in the episode and realize that this was actually a story beat. Was they talk about how the bullets can't withstand coming out of the mold. And if they can't withstand coming out of the mold, they'll never fire out of the gun. I didn't realize until the episode was over and I was looking at my notes that they never tried. They never fired a just ice bullet.
Nope.
Which I was super confused by. Because you do see them get an ice bullet out here and they're talking about how it's difficult and whatever. But I found that very odd.
I think the thing that comes next just kind of took over the question.
Yeah.
You know, like it became so difficult, which also like the meat bullet was odd and fascinating. They decided at one point to put hamburger meat in the tip of it.
And Adam's like, this is the one that's going to work. And I was like, why?
Can forensics not determine one type of meat from another?
So this is also where, and maybe this is a side effect of like trying to keep notes while watching the show or whatever. I also didn't realize they were going to freeze the meat bullet too.
Right.
So at first I was like, if ice isn't going to hold up, just raw meat.
Why would meat?
Like, well, this is not going to. I found this whole section a little bit confusing and where they actually ended up with the bullets. It's super entertaining.
Very.
But it felt like it when they call the episode Ice Bullet, I'm thinking of an ice bullet. I'm thinking of a pure bullet of ice. Not. They also make one out of gelatin, basically, and they freeze that as well. And they're making a couple of options. And I just found all of that. I kept waiting for the actual ice bullet, and then the episode ended, and I went, it never happened.
Didn't happen.
They do introduce a guy here who I want to talk about because I kind of went down a rabbit hole a little bit. They introduce a guy named Dr. McCarthy, who you were referencing earlier, who is from a company called Exponent. And he's the guy who's talking about he's done research into the Kennedy assassination. He's the guy who has the janky CG footage.
Yeah.
I looked up Exponent. Exponent is like the coolest company I've ever heard of.
Really?
How they refer to themselves is as an American engineering and scientific consulting firm. And basically they perform scientific research and testing to aid in all kinds of industries like manufacturing and food companies and whatever. They're basically real world Mythbusters.
That's dope.
Their website, like their header video on their website is like cars crashing that they did to test something.
Yeah.
Like they are, if you want to go out and get a job as a real world Mythbuster, I think that's where you go.
Wow.
It's super cool that they found this guy.
Yeah.
And they found this whole thing. And apparently he had also done his own research into magic bullets.
Second time of the episode.
Yeah. Right? How do you find these people?
I don't know.
But look them up because it's super cool. I can't obviously if they go into some weird realm that I'm not aware of, I'm not endorsing their company. But what I saw, it looked really, really cool. This is where we got the janky CG footage of the Kennedy assassination.
It's my favorite.
There's even a glitch at the beginning of it that they kept in where like the scope raises twice.
Yes.
What?
I love it.
What was this?
Cliff, I'm so sorry. I love it so much. It's just so... Someone had to... We got computer imaging.
Yeah.
And just so shortly thereafter, someone was like, a playable demo of the JFK assassination? I think we need a playable demo of the JFK assassination.
I feel like that was assigned to some guy who got into CG watching Spielberg movies and was like, I want to make Jurassic Park. I want to make Jurassic Park. I want to make Jurassic Park. And his first assignment is PS1 JFK.
Yes. It's great. It just looks so bad. But then I got to think, would I want it to look really good?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. They couldn't have used it if it looked good.
No.
If it was like, like modern
PS5 graphics.
Yeah, if it was modern video games or especially like movie CGI, you'd never be able to use it. So like the fact that it's janky is the only reason it works, but it is janky. This is also perhaps fittingly where they get a letter back early in the episode. We didn't mention it, but they had written to the CIA saying, we want to know if you have magic bullets, which is the funniest letter you could possibly write.
So funny.
And the CIA writes back and basically says, yeah, no, we're not going to tell you about magic bullets if they exist, which we're not saying they do.
Yes. The last thing I want to bring up about that letter is that it does bring up, or it does mention something that they gloss right over, but is an extremely startling statement. The CIA is not subject to Freedom of Information Act requests.
Right.
Excuse me, what? No, this is the one part of the government that you can't question.
It's even
Don't worry about it.
It's even better than that because if I remember correctly, it's not just the CIA. It's the CIA is not subject to Freedom of Information Act requests about the stuff we're currently doing.
Yep.
Holy crap.
What do you mean currently doing? This happened in the 60s, man.
Exactly. That is such a own goal of we're writing to you about something that happened 50 years ago. And they're like, well, we can't tell you what we're up to now. And you're like, whoa. I didn't ask what you're up to now.
Still you're doing this? Oh my.
I didn't ask what presidents you're plotting against now. What are you talking about?
Oh man.
Yeah. But we end up cutting to the gun range where they set up their first test. And we have another montage, basically, of various tests here. I'll kind of run through them. First test is the meat bullet. It fires and embeds meat in the dummy, but there's no real damage. They do talk about how it riddles the dummy with gunpowder and extra stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to make again, going back to kind of the weirdness inherent in this myth, it's not really about the ice bullet. It's about a magic bullet that disappears.
Right.
If you're embedding the target with a bunch of gunpowder, that doesn't really do the trick. Number 2 is the gelatin bullet. It fires, it hits, actually penetrates, but it's not lethal. They then have some high-speed shots comparing the gel bullet to a real bullet. And what the real bullet does to that gelatin dummy, I've seen it a million times because of this show, but man, it's horrifying.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
The ripples.
Yes. I mean, what that high-speed camera, even at 1,000 frames, like what it shows is just that's the one like visceral kind of like, ooh. Like that doesn't, no, that's actually kind of hard to watch a little bit, you know, kind of feeling moment in the show. That was really something. They even try doing it from point blank range, and they get some results, but still not what they're looking for. But the whole process of all these tests, all this stuff going back and forth, and let's try this and let's try that, and talking to the guy on the gun range about the safety and what happens and blah, blah, blah. It's just, it's brilliantly edited. It's a really good little montage to the point that even the narrator says in true Mythbusters style, now we're going to make the umbrella gun. Yeah. Like we're 4 episodes in and there's already like, classic Mythbusters.
You know how they do.
It was so good. It was like, and it is, they're totally right. They called their shot on that one. So then they take a weird. Called their shot. Oh, unintentional puns. They go on a weird kind of
talking about JFK being dead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just this is where they take a weird kind of turn, and I liked it. But in terms of the story of the myth, all of a sudden going off into the umbrella gun thing, it's really cool. And again, the engineering here is awesome, and the way that they, this machine and the way they talk about it, all this stuff is really cool. But I was the whole time going, what does this have to do with the ice bullet?
Nothing. And I think that because they get into that it was in the news recently.
Yeah,
right.
This had actually happened. There was an umbrella gun had been used, which again is another one of those kind of going back to the pilots. Yep. We're trying to prove something. They're putting a lot of time and drama into something they already know happened.
Right. Right.
That doesn't actually, and the whole time I still had not realized. I was waiting for them to fire an actual ice bullet. Like I thought that was going to be the main event. I thought that was going to be, we did the meat, we did the gel, we're going to fire a pure ice bullet now. I thought that was going to be, because that's what the freaking episode is called. I was waiting for that through this whole thing going, okay, the umbrella gun's cool, but when are you going to get to it? When are you going to get to it?
And that's why if I had control over a magic bullet segment, to me, what you do is you test all the theories that are out there
for what a magic bullet could do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you make an ice bullet? No, probably not. Can you make a meat bullet? Like, can you fire them from this distance? Can you know, and all of that. And those, and granted, they got taken off the table pretty quickly. The reason why I think they didn't go that route is I think they understand that to some degree they kind of need to keep the government happy. Like they will call upon them. They do need things from them. And if you go through the Occam's razor of eliminating the weird possibilities for why the bullet wasn't there, the only answer you're left with is somebody took it from the crime scene.
Yeah.
And they can't come out and say that.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it because when you were saying that, I was thinking, I don't know if it's that so much as like, that kind of goes back in the territory of testing a negative that we've talked about before. True. And so I don't think it's actually that interesting of a test, but you do make a really good point of if you're going to take that narrative all the way to the end, eventually you have to answer it.
And the only answer left to you is that somebody that was there did that, took it away.
And regardless of how you feel about that story or that answer, that is Mythbusters. Kind of Mythbusters' whole thing is anti-conspiracy theory, and that sort of requires them to embrace conspiracy. To talk about that. So it's like territory they can't go. Yeah. Which again is why I thought that this was a movie myth.
Right.
I really did not remember this being, JFK assassination, because why would you?
No, and I even think I'm pretty sure it was like Shooter, the movie Shooter.
I think you're right.
I think did that. But I was so with you because I was like, one, I'm not even familiar with people applying this to the JFK assassination. And two, you don't really want to touch it.
Yeah.
Like it's so charged.
And honestly, let's put this to the listeners. If we're wrong, if this is some weird branch of like JFK assassination lore that we're not familiar with, please tell us. But this was, let us know if you had the same reaction, because this was very surprising and a weird, it hurt the myth a little bit in what I think was actually a really cool series of tests.
Yes.
I just wish that the structure around it had been a little bit easier to follow or made a little bit more sense, because it definitely pulled me out of it. But one thing coming out of this umbrella sequence that we do get that's awesome is our first Adam versus Jamie test, where they actually say, I'm going to build it this way, you're going to build it this way, we're going to see who's better. They don't really follow through on that.
No, and furthermore, it appears to be an accident.
Yeah.
Like it's literally just Adam going, it's been 3 days. I'm fed up with this. I'm going to do it.
And Jamie's pissed off with himself over it too. So
he's like, well, I've got to finish it this way because I started.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right. Well.
Also, there was a moment where Adam actually asked, "What, you waste all your time?" And I was just like, really sensitive, buddy.
Dude. Yeah. That.
Some wingman you are.
Yeah, seriously. And also,
wow.
But Jamie it rolls off.
Yeah, well, they know each other so well that that's clearly,
how they communicate.
Yeah. Because he was saying what Jamie was thinking. I felt like what that moment was, but I was like, damn.
Don't you hate people like that?
Yeah.
Like I've definitely got mine that do that for me, but some people, that is their personality, is just pointing out flaws in other people. It's like, yeah, I know.
And some of them are in the comments to this podcast.
Hi, bubbies.
Both umbrella guns end up working better than the various ice bullets, which is super interesting. But I wrote down they already knew that because this had been done.
It happened, right?
So that felt like quite a detour. In the end, the results here are they go with busted because none of the bullets could do nearly what they set out to prove that they could do. And I said, okay, but what happened to the ice bullet? And this is where I had to go back and actually rewatch. I was like, surely I missed it looking at my notes.
Yeah.
And I went back and found, no, they just say, oh, it would never survive. And so we're not going to do it.
Okay.
But then I thought,
I guess
they never tested pure ice, but all the bullets are frozen.
That's true.
So, I mean, I don't know. This is a total guess, but like, is there something about the frozen meat that is I guess it would hold up better than frozen water, but like, I would love to see that test.
I would love to see, because my first thought went to dry ice.
Yeah.
I was like, do a dry ice bullet. Like, would that not?
Also, could you? I mean, I know they were doing like
they know much better than me. That goes without saying.
But what that makes me think of is an interesting thing we didn't really touch on. They specifically, because they were tying this to the Kennedy assassination, they used a Mannlicher Carcano style rifle, which is the rifle used in that.
Right.
But it feels like if you really wanted to make an ice bullet, like, what about putting ice in a shotgun and shooting it out, or putting it in a different? Does it have to be in this one specific cartridge? Could ice be lethal and then go away?
Reverse engineer it from the point of, I need to make an ice bullet.
Right.
What gun can accommodate that? Not can we put an ice bullet in this specific gun?
Exactly.
I think that makes sense.
Especially when the specific gun is...
When they just ditch it. When they just move on from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also thought about, remember the scene, it's in one of the Kill Bill movies where they shoot someone with rock salt?
Yes. That's 2.
That's in 2. That's another.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that potentially dissolve in a body over time? Like, could they have done a test with salt? Could they have done a test with, if they were really testing all different types of bullets? Like, that was just another material that came to mind. I don't know.
That's true.
This was a weird one for me. I loved all the process. I loved everything that we talked about here. It was really cool, and it did have a classic, like they said, true Mythbusters style to it.
Yeah.
But as a myth, it was just weird. But that is our very first episode of the post-pilot season Mythbusters.
Woo!
I think, like, I was already having fun, but this episode makes me really excited for what we have coming.
Gosh, I tried so hard to mess it up a few times. A few times. Some might say I did. Like, comment, and subscribe. If you
No, but genuinely, like, it's great to see the show really hitting a stride this early. Now we're starting every episode. It's like boom, boom, something that is such a staple of the show. We're seeing it constantly. We're getting in that territory. It's really exciting. I think this is it is. You said in one of our very first episodes, like, first seasons are hard. First episodes are hard. It's crazy how fast this show is gaining speed.
True. And I think that will also help explain why it was so popular almost immediately.
Yeah.
It did experience it. Correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that it was pretty popular from the get-go and then only continued.
I think it was pretty much an instant hit. Yeah. It would.
I get it.
I'd love to hear more about what that, like, if was there an episode, was there a moment that pushed it over the edge? But I think it was successful from early on. But we will be back next week with season 1, episode 5 of Mythbusters. The myths are cell phone destruction, silicone breasts, and CD-ROM shattering.
Sounds very early 2000s,
doesn't it? I think I remember the cell phone myth, and I'm not sure about the other two. So we're starting to hit uncharted territory for me here. I'm excited.
Is it a Nokia?
Yeah, probably.
Probably is.
Is it? It should be like, can you destroy? Okay, that would be an interesting myth.
It's just busted that you can destroy it. Like, we have tested a thermonuclear device, and we do not. Cannot be done. Well done, Nokia.
Oh, man. I'm excited. Please watch the episode so that you can follow along with us. And we will be back next week. We'll see you then.
Goodbye, bubbies. Try This at Home is produced by Slugline Media. The show is written, hosted, edited, and shot onto the internet by Cliff Bumgardner and Harrison Stewart. Our music is by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. You can follow the show on Instagram @TryThisPod or email us trythisathomepod@gmail.com.